The nice thing about doing this kind of thing, when you're on YouTube, you're doing your own podcast, when you're not signed to one of these majors like ESPN FS1, is that you don't have to start your Mondays off talking about bad teams. And by bad teams, I'm talking about the Dallas Cowboys, who, because of the relationship and TV network, FS1's going to talk about the Cowboys all day. They have been. ESPN, because it's Stephen A. Smith, and part of his persona is talking about the Cowboys. I don't have to do that here, which is wonderful, because I don't think the Cowboys are a very particularly good team, and I don't think the Cowboys are particularly an interesting team at the moment. So we get to start our Mondays off by talking about the team that I believe, as we stand here today, the best team in the NFL, and that is the Detroit Lions. Now, this statement has never not been weird for me. I've discussed this as I've talked about the Lions over the last several months. It's weird to talk about the Lions in such a positive fashion because growing up my entire life, the Lions and the Browns were the poster child for, just horrible, awful franchise. Didn't win, wasn't successful, not well run, not talented rosters. There's a handful of players you could pick out who were great, but that's pretty much who the Lions and the Browns were. Now, the Lions, what makes them so great is all the stuff that you think applies to the other great teams in the league actually applies to them. So let's look at this. Let's do the teams that people consider to be the best teams in the NFL. Let's start with the team that I've championed the last couple weeks, the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens lost yesterday to the Browns, and while I'm not going to get into it too much, Tony will join us tomorrow to discuss more. The Ravens yesterday, when they lose, there's a commonality in all of their losses. Derrick Henry doesn't have that many attempts. He has 11 attempts. And we always ask ourselves afterwards, why would you not give Derrick Henry more rushing attempts? Look what he's done this season. The Lions, who also have an incredible running game, it's not Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, but it's really good, and they have a better offensive line than the Ravens. They don't ever shy away from what they do well. They scored 52 points yesterday, and Jared Goff threw for 85 yards. He was still accurate. He was still threw 3 touchdowns, but they realized we don't need to throw the ball to score points, nor do we need to throw the ball to win. We're just going to run. We have the best offensive line in football, and we are just going to do what we do great. Secondly, their quarterback, let's go to the next team, the Kansas City Chiefs. Why are the Chiefs so special? You've obviously got their resume, but the current 2024 iteration of the Kansas City Chiefs, who they're undefeated, they're playing this quote-unquote great, and their quarterback isn't playing well. Again, that's what we say about the Chiefs. It's actually applicable to the Lions. Not that Jared Goff's not playing well, but again, 85 yards. How many teams in the NFL could score 52 points and only have 85 yards from their quarterback? And don't tell me, oh, it's the Titans. I haven't seen anybody else do it to the Titans. So their quarterback, who is not required to play well, but when he doesn't play well, it is not super gaudy numbers. It's not these big explosive plays, but he's not turning the ball over, which is what Patrick Mahomes is actually doing this season. Because Patrick Mahomes isn't just not playing well, Patrick Mahomes is playing poorly. Jared Goff is not needed, nor do they have to absolutely have him play exceptional or exceedingly well for them to win. Again, 85 yards, 52 points. Make it make sense. Name another team in the NFL that can do that. Going into the season, the San Francisco 49ers, another great team. Well, we've been on this for the last couple months. Look at the rosters. The Lions actually have the roster that San Francisco has had. Now, San Francisco is older, and they've sustained more injuries. But when you start listing off all these all-pro guys on the Niners, who, Debo, yes, he's been injured, but he hasn't lived up to his all-pro status. Ayuk, yes, he's injured, but he hasn't lived up to his all-pro status. McCaffrey hasn't even played. The Lions have Sewell, St. Brown, the entire offensive line. On defense, Hutchinson before he went out. Their roster is just as good, if not better, than the 49ers, and they're younger. Now, will they get to keep it for as long as the 49ers did? That's a cap question. That'll be up to the general manager. But as we stand in 2024, the Detroit Lions, who 2 years ago you would have said Eagles, Niners, best roster in the sport, and it wasn't particularly close. The Chiefs, if you want to say, well, Mahomes, being Mahomes was such a big swing factor that, because he's there, that sways the roster in the Chiefs' favor. But the Niners, Eagles, best rosters top to bottom. The Lions now have the best roster in the division, or in the National Football League, I'm sorry. And then lastly, for the teams that we say are great but have a weakness, the Bills, who currently have been playing great but have a weakness, which was no explosive receivers, no playmakers. They went and got Amari Cooper. Maybe that'll solve it. Still have a bunch of injuries on defense. The Chiefs, their defense has been great. Offense hasn't been there. The Ravens, if you ask Tony, which I'm going to take his word on it, it's a coaching thing. All these teams that there's a glaring thing there that's like, okay, this needs to be better before they can progress. For the Lions, it's supposed to be their defense. We know the offensive line. We know the running backs. We know the receivers. We know Aiden Hutchinson when he's healthy. But their defense is supposed to be the weakness. The Lions are only giving up 19 points a game, which is top 10 in the NFL. And we know their offense on any given day is top 2 to 3 in the NFL. So where, is the real weakness for the Detroit Lions? Coaching, culture, O-line, D-line, especially if Hutchinson's able to come back, and or if they make a trade, which if you're a Jets fan or you're a Panthers fan, you're one of these teams that are struggling, the Raiders, get ready to be unloading more of these players. What happens if Detroit goes after the Jets corner, or what happens if they go after a Quinnen or Quincy Williams? Imagine Quinnen Williams on the Detroit defensive line, and then Hutchinson comes back for the playoffs. This team has everything. This is the actual best team in the NFL. And the excuses or the reasons that we give these other quote-unquote great teams, the Lions have all of the actual reasons and none of the excuses. They're just, when they line up, they're just better than the teams that they're playing. From a coaching perspective, from a culture perspective, their offensive line, receivers, skill position, running backs, their quarterback, who I understand, I heard this earlier today, I thought it made so much sense, but we don't put Jared Goff in this context. This is Jared Goff's second rebuild. When he was drafted by the Rams, rebuild, got to a Super Bowl. When he got to Detroit, Detroit was still in a rebuild. And if Detroit goes to a Super Bowl, we have to change the conversation around Jared Goff. I know we don't want to give him his credit. We don't want to say he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league because stylistically or his numbers aren't as flashy or his play style. But Jared Goff, second rebuild, one with the Rams, one with the Lions, and potentially going to his second Super Bowl this year. We're going to have to reevaluate, though, if we look at Jared Goff. Switching from that, baseball we talked about yesterday, World Series, almost 15 million viewers. I think it peaked at 18 million. Best in 7 years. Really fantastic game 1, really good game 2, and game 3 is tonight. And I know this sounds, my wife is going to think this is blasphemy and she'll be angry at me, but I will, for content, I will accept it. Tonight, who wins, I firmly believe will win the World Series. The Dodgers do not want the Yankees to gain momentum. Because if the Yankees can get momentum, the Yankees, we said this in the beginning of the series, the Yankees have far more arms that can go longer into games with starting pitching than the Los Angeles Dodgers do. Now, the Dodgers pitching has, we didn't predict this, but the Dodgers pitching has pitched longer into games and has been better than I think they even would have, what they've gotten out of their starters. I think Dave Roberts could not have prayed hard enough, and if he did pray, this is exactly what he would have wanted. But we said at the beginning, the Dodgers won a 4 or 5 game series. They used a lot of their bullpen and a lot of innings against the Padres, a lot of their bullpen, a lot of innings against the Mets, and they do not want to see this happen in the World Series too, because by the time we get to Game 5, Game 6, and if we potentially have to play Game 7, whether that's in Los Angeles or not, you don't want the tired bullpen arms. And Dave Roberts, a guy who was prone to pulling his starter early, Dave Roberts started all of these games talking about, can I just get 3 innings, maybe 4 out of a starting pitcher? And if he has to throw a bullpen game, he absolutely will. But you can only do that so much before some of these guys, the wear and tear is real. Flaherty now didn't look like it. Before game 1, they were talking about Flaherty's fastball was already down to 90, 91 miles per hour. A lot of these guys, they're pitching longer than they ever have. They're being used more than they ever have. And the Dodgers having to rely on their bullpen far more than New York, conventionally speaking. And if this keeps going, these guys are eventually going to start seeing these guys more and more often. So the advantage you get from the specialized pitching from Juan Soto seeing 3 different pitchers in a game, but when he sees the same 3 pitchers in 3 straight games, he's going to start getting some of these hits. When Aaron Judge, say what you want about his postseason performance up to this point, you do not want Aaron Judge to start seeing the ball and start seeing some of these relievers multiple times. The Dodgers want a quick, clean 4 or 5 game series. The Yankees want this to go 6-7. The longer this is, the more it benefits the New York Yankees. So I truly, truly believe, even though the Dodgers are up 2-0, it's going back to New York. If New York can win these 2 games at home and they can prolong this series, it's the Dodgers do not want this to be a 6-7 game series. I guarantee you. I guarantee you. So the winner tonight, in my opinion, that's the winner. That takes the whole thing. Because Shohei is great, hurt, but he's still going to play. Mookie's been great. Freddie Freeman is already off to, if you had to say an early World Series MVP, he would clearly have it. But the Dodgers just don't have enough quality arms to keep throwing them out there. They have a lot of quality arms in terms of their bullpen, but they can't keep throwing these guys out at the rate that they've been. And I know that sounds like a generic take, but it's the truth. Because Aaron Judge gets going, Juan Soto gets going, Stanton, who had a home run, Stanton's already been going, continuing to go. You don't want these guys to keep, these are professionals, some of the best hitters in the game of baseball, and some of the best power hitters. And in these kind of games, one swing means a lot. Because you're not getting a lot of hits in a World Series game. You're not going to be able to sit there and go first to third as often as you could in the regular season. Shohei potentially might not even be a stolen base threat after getting hurt trying to steal second. So these guys, Judge, Soto, Stanton, these power hitters, the Dodgers do not want them to keep getting more and more at-bats against arms that are going to get more and more tired. So Game 3, it's always pivotal it's always pivotal, but I feel more so than normal, the Dodgers need to win tonight. The Yankees obviously have to win tonight because they're not coming back from 0-3.